Harry Vardon was the greatest golfer of his time. At the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th, he won 6 British Opens and 1 US Open, and was one of the original members of the then very new British PGA. And his wonderful book, which really was the first big selling book about golf, called The Complete Golfer, which is a lovely reference in the title back to The Complete Angler by Isaac Walton from the 17th century. He wrote in that book many things that are easily dismissed nowadays as being functional of a bygone era where the equipment was greatly different, game was different, and as a consequence, irrelevant to today. Now, I read the book because I was besotted by the game. I read it 60 years ago almost, and found many interesting elements in there. I was playing golf in Scotland and playing on an upland course, Kings Park in Stirling, which at the time only had 1 tree on it. So a lot of rough, heather, gorse. And somehow it fit for me to read that book and to learn something about it. Obviously, I carried those elements with me throughout the next 50-odd years of teaching golf, because there are some things in there that I still find valuable for my clients. With regard to the equipment, it's easy again, as I said, to dismiss the references in his book because of the equipment. And the biggest feature, of course, is the shaft. The shaft, made of hickory, had a lot of axial torque. And as a consequence, the swing had to be built to first load and then maintain and then unload correctly in a way that steel, which came along in 1930-ish, never found necessary. And so Max Faulkner, who was a wonderful golfer whom I met once when I was doing my apprenticeship, he won the British Open at Portrush in 1951 and was very stylish and wonderful. He wrote in many articles subsequently about his experience with the transition between hickory and steel. And he thought that the differences were, of course, what I just said, the torque, but also the weight. They were heavier, and he thought thicker in the grip, although I've found plenty that didn't have thick grips. And so the golf swing was built for that. So if you look at this swing of Harry Vardon, you can see that he takes the club very much inside on the backswing, lifts it up with the elbow pointing straight out, as Max Faulkner noted. And he thought that this was to overcome the torque. Well, let's talk about why. That meant that the hands were very close to the right shoulder at the end of the swing, with an open club face where it's hanging down more on the back of the wrist, quite what they call cuppy, a little ambiguous, but meaning folded back. And as a consequence, the first thing that you'll see in his swing is that he's throwing the club away from himself by essentially extending the arms in the first half of the downswing. Well, that actually loaded the shaft, and did it at a time when its unloading would be appropriate. Obviously, a loaded shaft will unload, and we need to time that. So he'd throw it away from himself and then sweep it in what would look to be a very shallow angle of attack. Now, obviously, with a long club, this is a mid-iron, but it's quite similar to what they call a cleek, which he wrote fairly extensively about. He advocated that the club would shave the grass tops for the last inch hitting the ball. In other words, quite a shallow angle of attack. And he even had a little diagram where he showed that if you're hitting in the wind, you catch the ball with the bottom edge of the club some way up the side of the ball as a way to drive the ball low and control the ball flight. So that early absorption or development of the torque in the shaft by thrusting the arms away, and then the early hit, were all part of what the shaft required. Now, he thought that with the cleek, which was like a modern long iron, that you could hit many different shots. In fact, he advocated that you didn't change clubs very often, and you very rarely ever hit the golf club at full power. He thought half power was a very good idea. And of course, when I'm training people, swinging at half speed is extremely valuable to develop familiarity. So he would change several things rather than the club. He would change the length of the club, the hand advance, the ball position, the openness of club face, the weight distribution, and the ball position varying left to right quite significantly. And so he advocated that one would benefit greatly by going out on the golf course with one golf club. Now, there are relatively few occasions where you might think that appropriate. It need be said that in Britain, every club in Britain at one point during each year will have a 4-club competition. And it's quite funny when you go in the bar afterwards, you'll hear many people walking in after their round and saying, I just had my best round of the year. We're allowed 14 clubs in the bag, but if you limit yourself to 3 or 4, you'll actually find that you learn many things. Now, back to the point of playing with one club, and Ballesteros, by the way, was very famous for being able to play an entire round with a 3-iron, including bunker shots. So similar idea. He thought that that would give you great insight into your game, and I totally agree. I think nowadays the best opportunity to do that is, especially here in the States, is to do what they call the twilight special, where you go out in the evening when there's only a couple of hours of daylight left, and there are relatively few people on the golf course, and it's usually a cheaper rate to pay the green fee. And you can play with one golf club and learn, I suggest, a great deal about your game.